Welcome back, everybody. So getting into that story of former BOSASA COO Angelo Agrizzi, he spent his first night behind bars. The state was successful in opposing bail when he appeared in the Palm Ridge court on charges of fraud and corruption. The magistrate declared Agrizzi a flight risk, saying he had amassed considerable wealth abroad. Now, Agrizzi, who testified at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, alleged to have not declared 33 million rand worth of movable assets. Earlier in the day, former ANC MP Vincent Smith appeared on the same charges, but his matter was postponed until December. Simultaneously, social media went abuzz when Agrizzi's lawyer, Danny Wiltz, insinuated that former BOSASA CEO Gavin Watson might actually not be dead. Wiltz then, of course, later on apologized. But we're going to analyze this a little bit more. Sandile Swana is going to be our guest, a political analyst, of course, and we're just trying to get that connection up and running with him. But a very, very interesting story that came out yesterday. And I think what we need to do is quickly take a break. And when we come back, we'll get straight into that conversation. Or is he there? Sandile, are you available? Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, you're here. Good. All right. So we stopped trying to get the picture. At least we've got your voice. That's a good thing. I mean, I gave the long introduction. This is kind of the background to what happened. So Agrizzi being denied bail, even though his lawyers say he's ill. Let's get your views on this.
Yeah, thank you so much. When you look at the picture that was presented by Agrizzi's lawyer, it looked very casual and confident that Agrizzi would get the bail. But when you look at the evidence provided by the prosecutors, that's when you see that Agrizzi actually hid a lot of very relevant information. For an example, Agrizzi himself did not disclose in his initial bail application until it was discovered, not by him, but by the SAPS, that he has an Italian passport that he had not disclosed. Number two, that as soon as he started cooperating with the authorities, he also started energetically transferring assets overseas.
I mean, if we go back, Agrizzi was fined 100,000 rand for making racist remarks. Then he's alleged to have not even declared, as we say, 33 million rand in movable assets thought to have been hidden in offshore accounts. Agrizzi, one would think, is in a bit of trouble at the moment.
Yes, the main trouble that he is in is that he initially profiled himself as someone who wanted to help the state and the people of South Africa by exposing corruption and collaborating and cooperating with the state in exposing corruption and prosecuting those who are involved in corruption. So he profiled himself as a good guy. So which would have meant that his colleagues at BOSASA and the political personalities such as Vincent Smith that had worked with him in these corrupt activities would now be sent to jail, while perhaps he would get a lighter sentence. But he was at the same time taking insurance by making sure that certain assets, very large volumes of assets, were being transferred to his wife or otherwise transferred to himself overseas. So he is now in trouble because he cannot be trusted by the state.
You know, this really brings into question, and we talk about this massive amount of money that has, perhaps been taken offshore, which, is one of the big problems. And this really brings into question how much of that state capture money is actually hidden in offshore accounts.
Yes, it is typical in these networks of corruption. It is part and parcel of corruption to take assets offshore, because if you are involved in corrupt activities, you know that it is quite likely that the police and the prosecutors will eventually discover what you are doing. So you want to be able to have offshore assets that your family can live off, or that you are able, like the Guptas have done, to run overseas and stay there. And we must point out that there are financial institutions in South Africa that specialize in assisting such people to move assets overseas.
You're quite right. And I mean, now that international travel is allowed in, this time, lockdown level 1, I mean, could we actually be seeing some people skip the country with dirty money in overseas accounts?
Yes, if you listen to the Agrizzi case and the prosecutors presenting their case, one of the biggest problems in South Africa, even an ordinary civilian like you and me, can actually leave the country without Home Affairs knowing, because our borders are wide open. We don't control our borders, the actual boundaries of our country. We expect everybody to come and report himself or herself at the gates that are authorized. But people cross into any part of this country. They can come through the seas, the oceans, they can cross the Zambezi River into all sorts of places.
I want to talk about perhaps one of the most astonishing things to come out of yesterday. And I mean, there's been a lot of talk about it, and, you know, conspiracy theorists and people asking questions from every quarter of society. Is Gavin Watson really dead? Now, this is always a question, and then, you know, we go back to, yes, he is. But then again, we bring up Agrizzi's lawyer, Danny Wilt, yesterday, saying Watson may be alive and well overseas. And, you know, we know this has been suggested before, that maybe he's even living in the Bahamas or in the Cayman Islands. What did you make of this? I mean, is it a case of where there is smoke, there certainly is fire?
I think what it is, for the time being, when the lawyer made the statement, that Agrizzi's lawyer, and obviously, you know, he's an officer of the court and all that, so it was taken seriously. Many people, some of the TV stations revisited it and so on. So, but what that does is that it casts aspersions on the ruling class, and that the ruling class, even in this whole thing of corruption, there are certain people that they may be hiding and exempting from proper prosecution. But you will notice at the end, I think you noticed at the end that this thing is catching a lot of wind out there. Then he came and placed it on record that it didn't mean anything by saying that.
Yeah, I mean, that's that again. I mean, you've just really left it open-ended, and a lot of speculation going on as to the whereabouts of Gavin Watson. Were you happy with the investigation into the accident of Gavin Watson? Did you find that there was some finality there? I mean, is there evidence that Gavin Watson, in fact, was in the car and he actually did die in that accident? I mean, can we say that that case is closed and you know, there's substantial evidence to suggest that that was the case?
The Watson family is correct in suspecting that something went wrong there, whatever it is. It was not handled properly. My suspicion comes from the fact that the scene was cleaned up even before the recording, the measurements, which is normally what happens. The scene needs to be sealed off, and then the correct forensic experts of different kinds and the accident reconstruction experts come in and do that undisturbed. But in the case of Watson, the vehicle was removed and there was a cleanup by the authorities. So from my perspective, there's a risk there that anybody wanted to reconstruct that has to exercise extreme skills to try and reconstruct that thing after the scene has been disturbed.
And that is perhaps that where there's smoke, there's fire, because I think more probably needs to be done into that investigation. Let's just wrap up the talk now of Agrizzi. We'll move on to Vincent Smith. But where to for Agrizzi now? I mean, he spent his first night in jail, back in court. What's the next step?
Yeah, well, the case is going to continue. Basically, you must remember that they are keeping him now in storage so that when they need him, he's within access to themselves all the time. That is the prosecutor. So they are going to go to answer, I think it's the 3rd of November or something like that. Him and Vincent Smith and Vincent Smith's company, they have to go and answer the cases of corruption and fraud. Where Agrizzi was an instrument, and I think his attorney agrees to this, that he was certainly an instrument in the payment of bribes to Vincent Smith or the facilitation of the various types of bribes that were paid. So they are going to go and answer the details of that. And then Vincent Smith on his own has got to answer the question of why he did not disclose all these gifts and loans and other things that he was receiving and assets that he was receiving from BOSASA.
Yeah,
in this particular case, and in a separate case, there will be a tax case, a SARS case against Vincent.
All right, so there's also the health issues at stake for Angelo Agrizzi, saying he's now on permanent oxygen, so it'll be interesting to see how that one is managed. Now, as you mentioned, the fraud and corruption case of former ANC MP Vincent Smith postponed to the 3rd of December. Bail is extended. He also appeared in the same court yesterday. He talks about how BOSASA paid for his daughter's car at university. Would we have liked to hear more from him? I mean, do you think that the net is closing in on all of those that are now affiliated to BOSASA, or do you think there are just so many more we haven't even heard of yet?
Yes, you must remember, I mean, very quickly, when you look at the history of this thing, BOSASA started getting these contracts in 2004. And what is also interesting is that when BOSASA started getting the contract, Nonde Balfour in 2004 moved from sports to become the Minister of Correctional Services. And moving from sport, the Watson family was famous for rugby in the Eastern Cape, and the Nonde was actually one of the key leaders in sport in the Eastern Cape. And Mti, the Commissioner of Correctional Services, from where the tenders were coming from, also came from the Eastern Cape. So it was a powerful combination of Eastern Cape people taking over the correctional services space in terms of the tenders for the food that is eaten by prisoners, the security cameras and other devices, as well as the fencing contracts amounting to billions from 2000. So those big fishes such as Nonde Balfour are still needed to come. The various ministers of police and various previous commissioners of police who allowed from 2004 to 2019 all the corrupt tenders to be awarded to BOSASA. So that is still coming.
I want to just wrap up the interview with one of the stories, obviously, that came out last night or yesterday. The national state of disaster, which was meant to end at midnight, has now been extended for another month. I mean, Cabinet, of course, saying this will, the period will allow government a progressive and responsible return to normal. They've put the measures in place that they're saying they want to avoid a second wave of infections. I mean, what are you thinking? This is the 5th extension since the start of the lockdown. I mean, is it good? Is it bad? We've seen other countries handling it. How are we doing, in your opinion?
Well, the issue of extending the state of national disaster, to me, is neither here nor there. Let me put it this way. Personally, I think the state of national disaster has served its purpose. So what though needs to happen is that the professionals who are in charge of health and safety in each industry, the supermarket, the retail sector, the hotel and tourism sector, and so on, need to convince the nation from time to time that they are upping their game and protecting us, because this is a normal health and safety issue now. It no longer needs any state of disaster.
All right, we leave it there. Political analyst Sandile Swana, thank you very, very much for talking to us about many of the issues surrounding former BOSASA COO Angelo Agrizzi, who now remains behind bars until his next court appearance, and that is on the 3rd of December. It is 7 o'clock.